Well, I guess that's how we start. What's your top 3 songs? Let's go.
Oh my God, no, that can't be the opener.
All right. Guys, welcome to the Professional Winner Podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Conyers. I'm with my main man, my brother, Gabe. We have Amber Heard today on the podcast. Nah, I'm joking. All right, we got the real Amber. The only Amber that matters. Amber,
the one that society loves.
The one that society loves.
Okay, I like that.
Amber Oliver, extraordinaire, one of the best publishers in New York City. Amber, am I doing you justice?
Well, I'm not a publisher yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, editor. About to be publisher, about to be author. Let's get it. Amber, tell the world who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Amber Oliver. I'm an editor at Tiny Reparations, Dutton, and Plume, which are imprints of Penguin Random House. I'm the main acquirer for Tiny Reparations, which was an imprint founded by Phoebe Robinson, who's an actor, comedian, screenwriter. I mean, she does all kinds of things.
Amazing.
So she's great, and I, acquire fiction and nonfiction for that imprint and all the other imprints I work under.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Dang, that was practice. How many interviews did you do?
I do this all the time.
That was like
I do this all the time.
spot on, articulate,
Very articulate, like you're talking fast, but everything is precise.
A lot of being an editor is pitching yourself. You pitch yourself a lot of times during, before you buy the book, while you buy the book. You're the main person to tell people about what books are and why you're interested and why you bought it. And so I talk about my books and myself a lot.
Well, let's pull back and you were talking about imprints. Let's generalize it.
Okay.
Let's actually describe to the audience what an imprint is.
I'll zoom out even further
Okay.
to say that there are 5 major publishers in the United States. Penguin Random House is the largest trade imprint in the world, actually. They have many offices in a lot of different countries around the world, but they're the main one here. I work there, and imprints are just like mini divisions that do specific kinds of books. An imprint could have sub-imprints that focus on different things. It's all, I don't know, there are so many different imprints under Penguin Random House and a bunch of other different publishing houses, but I work at 3 of them, which all are under the Penguin Random House umbrella.
Wow.
Okay, and we got, let's name the 5. What's the other 2?
Penguin Random House is number 1, and then I don't know the rest of the order.
Hold on. Are you biased?
No, it literally is number 1. It's literally number 1.
I've heard of Penguin when I was,
I've talked to people that don't read books.
When we have the most imprints out of all of the, the publishing houses, because, Penguin and Random House merged in 2013, and so they became the biggest house in this country and the world again. So there's Penguin Random House, there's HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Hachette, and Macmillan. So those are the 5 publishing houses. Hopefully not to become 4, but that's a thing I don't want to get into right now.
So let's backtrack a little bit. So we know the amazing career you have and the amazing things you're doing, and we're going to talk about that throughout the podcast. But let's go back to childhood. Tell us a little about Amber, your upbringing, where you're from, and give us as much detail as you feel comfortable giving us.
So I grew up between the Bronx and Harlem. Well, earlier than that, my family is from Queens. Most of my family is from Queens on my mom's side. My mom is the one who raised me. So I grew up partly in Queens for the beginning, and maybe 5 years. And then I moved to the Bronx, and we sort of moved between the 2 boroughs for a number of years. And I went to school between Harlem and the Bronx. I actually went to a school within the Evander Childs campus. And I don't know if you know anything about Evander.
My sister went to Evander Childs. I know a lot about
that shit is wild. It was a wild school. There was always fights breaking out. They didn't have a great curriculum. There weren't enough teachers to man all of the students who needed all this help, because we're all inner city kids. So it wasn't the best school that prepared me for college, I feel like. Either way, I did end up going to college. I went to a private college for the first year, and that was good. It was a good experience. I think it was St. Joseph's College, which is in Brooklyn. I went there for a year, but it was very expensive. I had to take out loans for most of that year, and I as we all know, we don't want to rack up that student loan debt. So I transferred to Hostess Community College, and I did 2 years there. And then I moved to City College, where I learned about publishing. But I don't know if you want to get into publishing now, later.
This is your podcast,
I
queen.
do have a question though. In college, what were you majoring in?
Oh, I mean, I was gonna stop there,
Oh,
go
okay.
into that. So if you want me to do that,
No, this is your podcast. Talk.
So I went to the City College, like I said, and in that college, I was an English major. I'd always been an English major with a concentration in sort of like creative writing. And at that school, at City College, they have a program called the Publishing Certificate Program, which was started by Walter Mosley, who's a best-selling author, has had movies made out of his books. Devil in a Blue Dress is one of those books and movies. Anyway, he started the program there in the 90s, and it's been a great resource for Black and Brown students all across the state, because it's a free program that you could take alongside your undergrad. Which is what I did. And there they sort of just like open up the world of publishing to you, which previously I didn't know about. You know, like when you go into a bookstore, you just see the books and they show up there and you don't think about how they got to the store. So, you know, it's really great to be in this program where they sort of just say like, hey, this is a whole career. This is a whole industry that you could do with an English degree, which was life-changing for me, because prior to that, people were like, why are you getting an English degree? It's worthless. Go into STEM, go into the medical industry. But knowing that I could have a job doing something I loved, reading books and editing books, was, you know, a dream. So in that program, they sort of like went over editorial stuff, but also talked about like marketing and publicity and all these other departments that I didn't know existed. And that just sort of like propelled me towards the publishing industry in general. I have a whole spiel where I could do my career up until now. I don't know if you want me to stop.
Let's stop.
Yeah.
And the reason why I want you to stop is because, like, how many Black editors are there?
I mean, there really aren't a lot.
I know the answer to that. Yeah, exactly.
There really aren't a lot. I mean, it depends on if you're talking about the adult division or the children's division. On the adult side, there are very few of us. I think I know all of them, and that's really sad, because there's hundreds of editors in this industry, and I know all of them, and it's less than 50.
Wow. Across
editorial assistants through executive editor, senior editor, publisher. So that's how limited it is. And we all do different things. It's not like we all focus on fiction or nonfiction, you know what I mean? So it's really not a great system right now.
And that's you think about, you said the Bronx, you said Harlem, right? You talk about your upbringing briefly about where you grew up at.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at New York City public schools, you look at our reading rates and how brown and Black children are always struggling in the reading department. When did your love for reading come? What was the first book that said, I want to major in English, I want to enter this world of publishing or editing, which is like so rare for a lot of Black women in the world we live in?
Yeah, I mean, it's rare because people don't know that you could do it. And then there's another piece of that, which involves, monetary issues that comes with the low pay of publishing, which I will not get into right now, but I'll stick to inspiration.
Pay Amber more. Pay Amber
pay
more.
All publishing people more. Unionize this shit.
Isn't this
there's a whole agenda.
The company? Come on.
Oh, it's an industry-wide problem. It's not just a
I
PRH problem.
see.
It's an industry-wide problem that I can talk about. And once we get to,
we're going to talk about it. Yep.
That's a later topic that I feel very passionately about. Okay, so inspiration. My mom was a big reader and still is a big reader. And so she would always take me and my older sister, who's about a year older than me, so we would read along the same level. She would take us to the bookstore, and we'd read a lot. She'd let us pick a book, and we'd read a lot from bookstores. We spent a lot of time in the library after school. The library, I think, for a lot of millennial and Gen X kids, was a safe space for people who maybe didn't have a parent to go home to after work, or maybe your parent worked late. It just provided a space where you could go and feel safe. And that place happened to have a lot of books, and I read a lot of books in the library too. So I just spent a lot of time around books, both at home and in other spaces, and continue to be a big reader. I don't know if there is one book that I would say that like started my journey. I want to say it's Harry Potter, but given everything that's going on with J.K. Rowling and her views, which I do not support, I don't want to shout that out. But that was, during that time, a formative book that led me to, continue my reading. And I think as I grew up and read more books in high school that were about Black people that I can't recall right now, but then later reading people like Zadie Smith and Toni Morrison and all Chimamanda and Ngozi Adichie, so many other prolific authors, just made me want to be able to be in that world.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
In terms of, you said you're in the world of fiction now. However, you always were in the world of fiction. Was that your preference? Did you always like nonfiction? Did you go back and forth?
That's an interesting question. Fiction is something I love and have wanted to do since the start of my career. I started out, my first book deal that I acquired was for fiction. But fiction is really hard, and you'll be surprised to know that a lot of fiction does not earn out the advance that we pay, because it's very hard to sell to consumers, and only some books come out on top, and that's just a reality of this industry. So I didn't always have the opportunity when I was a younger editor to buy books the way I wanted to, that were about the things that I wanted them to be about, and talking to the communities that I wanted them to talk to. And so instead I switched to nonfiction, which can be measurable in a number of ways because, you're looking at platform, whether that's Twitter or YouTube or TikTok or the different bylines they have in major publications. That's, actual data that you could look at. In nonfiction, which makes it easier to sell to my publishers. Fiction, you're sort of just like, it's a gamble, you're basing it off of other books that have sold well that are similar. So that led me to sort of split my list into nonfiction and fiction, and it's been interesting to say the least. I can edit both, but yeah.
However, now let's say, what is your personal preference?
I mean, fiction.
All right.
There's something beautiful about the way words can transport you. It could help you escape. You could relate to it. A lot of books that I read in school didn't reflect me, didn't reflect my environment, didn't reflect my values. And so me as a gatekeeper, as many people would call me, being able to help to share those stories the way that I consume them is, beautiful. I love that experience. Yeah.
I've always told myself that Black people sell trauma, right?
I mean,
and when you come from the Bronx, Harlem, Queens, or pretty much any borough in New York City, is this whole concept that we sell trauma, right? So it's very interesting to me that, I think if you look at fiction, you have to be able to dream. You have to be able to have a vision. And I think when you say, my mom introduced me to reading, we went to the library, which I don't think is the story for most Black and brown kids, right? To have a mom who's just interested in reading, and we even have the time to say, I'm going to take my little girls to the book. So it's kind of very interesting to me, because when I look at my life, I always cared about nonfiction, right? I wanted to see the Malcolm X, the Martin Luther Kings, the people who dealt with trauma and understood trauma. So I don't even think I'm asking you a question here. I'm kind of just making a statement. It's just very interesting to me how I just feel like most Black people, and I could be, I could be off the limb here, but I just feel like most Black people that I know always gravitate towards nonfiction because
why? It's because it's about Black people.
Yeah.
It's about us.
Yeah.
A lot of fiction wasn't about us.
Yes.
What were you supposed to read? What were you supposed to connect with?
I can't relate to Peter. Yeah, I can't relate to Peter. I can't relate to Harry Potter.
It's only in the last, maybe, I want to say 10 years that there's been a resurgence of African American fiction, because it went away completely when there was an exodus of Black editors from the 2000s who were in the industry. So
can you elaborate on that? Why do you think there has been a resurgence?
That's before my time, when those editors came and then were, I don't know, fired. And this is the thing that I think happens in publishing a lot. They think Black and brown lives are profitable for a certain amount of time, and then after that it's a fad, it's a trend, it's gone. But that's just not how life works. That's not how our experiences work. So it's really crazy to have them think that. still in this day and age. But anyway, now there has been an influx of Black and brown people coming into this industry who want to see the same changes that I wanted to see, reflecting other experiences in publishing for a lot of different perspectives that didn't get the same space before. So there are a lot of editors who are focusing on that right now, and publishers have made a concerted effort to hire more lower level people in the industry. So it does look different in that makeup, but there's still a lot of work to do in terms of mid-level and senior level people. So I don't know that much has changed. I think publishing just needs to hope that these people who are at mid-level and senior level don't leave.
And I have another interesting question. Just as a healthcare provider, how has COVID affected the publishing industry?
I mean, in a lot of ways, many of us worked from the office prior to 2020. And so everything moving to email and Zoom and Teams has been an adjustment for a lot of people, especially the execs who are almost all very, not want to say very old, who are not, technologically savvy, I should say, some of them. So that was an adjustment, but also it's just created a lot of burnout. For a lot of editors and agents and a lot of people in this industry, because there's been a lot of projects that have gone out because people were home and maybe writing a little bit more and sending them out to agents. A lot of those projects were about Black lives and how they exist in America on the nonfiction side. On the fiction side, it was kind of the same thing. So there was a lot more submissions going out, which meant a lot more work for editors, before acquisition, at acquisition, and then that means there's more work during the next phase of the process for all of the in-house staff. So that contributed to a lot. And also there's no separation, a lot of what I do and what a lot of people in publishing do extends beyond the 9-to-5 workday. We're working in evenings, we're working on the weekends. And so when you don't have that separation of my work is here at the office and I'm coming home to be by myself, and it's just all a big blur of being in your home, that's a huge adjustment. And I think it's affected everybody deeply in thinking about how do I want to spend my time? Is it working all the time, or is it spending time doing other things that I enjoy because life is short, because so many people have lost their lives due to COVID? So much about this experience has changed. Is it worth it?
I think that's the perfect transition into pay. You talk about burnout. You say you guys are working way above the clock. Let's talk about how editors are paid and finances in the industry.
I mean, we're all paid really badly.
Talk about it. Give us the details.
I mean, so you start off, first, it's a very slow way to promotion when you start from the lower levels. I can only speak to editorials. It's the only department I've ever worked in. When you start in editorial, I started working in publishing full-time in 2015, and I got a full-time job at a big house in 2016. 2016, the entry-level salary for an editorial assistant was $33,500.
Wow.
That is basically poverty in New York City.
Might as well work at McDonald's.
Exactly. I got a 4-year degree to make minimal money. Yeah. It was like $16 and change.
Not saying that working at McDonald's is bad.
Yeah, it's nothing wrong with that. But after you've invested in college, to not get any return on that is crazy. When they expect that of you. It's not like they're saying you can do this job without a degree. You very much can't. And anybody who says that they're not is lying. That's again another issue. I have a lot of issues with this industry. So yeah, it's very hard to survive on this industry, in this industry, on that pay. And the pay doesn't get better for a long time because there aren't clear rules about how to get promoted, for many years. You have to do, long hours that are after hours, and you don't always get overtime for that. And it makes it hard for Black and brown people to want to stay in this industry when it's not financially viable. I mean, I don't come from money. My mom was a single mom, and she made a regular salary and still doesn't make 6 figures. But that means that I was always without something. And so I don't have a plan to fall back on. There's no childhood home. There's no cash I'm going to inherit. I'll probably inherit her debt, if anything, And so being able to pursue this industry means that there's an assumed base level of privilege that the people who are operating in this industry are, living in, because they're the ones who can afford to do this job without waiting years and years and years to make more.
Yeah.
So that's a huge issue in this industry. And I think a lot of great blogs like XOXO Publishing or Publishers Brunch, which exist on, social media, they've been doing a lot of great work in trying to get people to unionize, to think about ways we can all band together and expect more from traditional publishing.
I find that to be very, very interesting, actually, because in a way it's like it's that industry, but I would say it's also affected along across a lot of different industries, right? Let's say it's scientists, right? Education, teachers are always out there on strikes. It's just, I always feel like it's about when someone is just, it's always involved with education in a way, right? When I was trying to become a maritime archaeologist, one of the big things that really took me away from that was pay, right? I'm doing all this, I'm doing all that, I'm diving underwater looking for slave ships, doing something amazing that you have to have a degree to, but why am I going to be getting paid something so little? So then I come back and I think, like, I have 5 brothers and 1 sister. I'm the oldest.
Exactly.
If anything happens to my parents, how would I be able to provide? It's always that thing, but it's just a problem with society itself, and it's unfortunate.
It's a problem with a lot of Black and brown people. I'm not saying this doesn't happen for other white people either, but it's more substantially happening to Black and brown people who have to maybe care for their families or send money back or worry about how the future of their siblings is going to work. Like, there's always that financial burden of not only yourself, but who can I lift up? Who can't I leave behind? Yeah.
Let's say Black, brown people, and even immigrants, because
immigrants, absolutely.
When people come over here, that's the first thing. Exactly. Become a doctor, become a lawyer. You can't chase your dreams, because unfortunately, you chasing your dreams is not going to provide you, enough money to give for the family.
You're making me depressed.
Yeah, I mean,
nah, because
tell me about it.
It's one of those things where it's like, there's always this idea of you have to chase your dreams. Like, your dreams matter. You have to do what you love. But how the fuck can I do what I love when I have all these stresses and these things I have to think about? And I battle this every day. It's like, do I spend more time with my kids, or do I go out and chase it so that they can do what they love? And my Black daughter told me, I want to be an editor, but Dad, they're gonna give me $35,000 a year. I would love to say, don't worry about that. You see this house? Daddy owns this. Stay in that room. You don't have to go nowhere until you can climb that ladder or whatever it takes, because I want you to be happy. And then we talk about mental health, the things I see on a daily basis as I'm working in medicine. We look at like all of these constructs of life and what we have to deal with, and that we're constantly faced with following our passions or survival. And then there's this whole bullshit American idea of pulling yourself by the bootstraps, where there's a cheat code for people who don't look like us.
Exactly.
Man, stop it, man. Y'all go.
What is the American dream if you cannot even chase your own dreams? It's always the biggest contradiction.
The American dream was not for us. It wasn't for us. It was for white Americans to advance their own families. It was never meant for us. And anytime we get close to achieving the American dream, then the goalpost gets moved. And I think it's going to continue to happen until there's, I don't know, a worker revolution, which I think we're on our way towards with the Great Resignation. So
it's a lot of things that's happening. You were talking about it at some point where it's very hard for you to adjust working at home, right? And it's very hard for me too. I don't like to work at home. I'm always out in a cafe. And for example, one day me and John working at the gym, we went to the gym all dressed up in sweats and everything, and we were looking very, I'm not going to use the word bummy, but we were looking different, We're not looking all professional winter like.
We was definitely looking like we was on an entry salary of $30,000.
Sweating. We have our computers. We go to this cafe. We're chilling. We're like, all right, let's do this. We got to prepare. We got to set up another episode of the Professional Winter Podcast. Someone walks in. No, actually, she wasn't walking in. She was already there. Yeah. It was super interesting. Let's hear about it, John. Who was this?
It was your boss. It was Phoebe Robinson.
Oh, no way.
In that moment, I was like, Amber. Because I think we was there. You were editing the podcast.
Yeah.
I was writing an email for like Bobby Love, who just got a book deal to reform like Meek Mill and them projects. So I was formulating the email. Gabe capped me on this little binge where I just started to fall in love with coffee shops and working. Because I'm used to working while I'm changing diapers, my kids running around. And Gabe was like trying to take me to coffee shops. And I'm like, that's Phoebe Robinson. And Gabe was like, who's that? I said, Google her. Gabe was like, oh shit. And I'm like, yeah, she's important. And then she just walked out. And I'm like, yo, we should have Amber on the podcast. That would be an amazing guest to celebrate a Black queen who does who, you know, kind of embodies this idea of what a professional winner is, and who can speak into young Black women and talk about this profession as just so unique and so important. We need people who look like you in this profession to tell stories and to like, you know, really hone in this imagination that we need our young Black children to have. We can't just be nonfiction. We have to learn how to dream. And it was such a crazy experience. You know, I have to, you know, me and Gabe have to create this image that we are our own important people, even though we're not. So, you know, we didn't fan it. I didn't be like, yo, Phoebe, give me an autograph, even though I wanted to, you know. So I kept it cool. I just kept looking, drinking my latte with oat milk, no dairy.
I feel that.
So
I feel that.
Yeah, man, it's just an interesting story.
It's always funny how things like that happen.
Yeah, I know,
you know?
her office is somewhere in Brooklyn, and she lives in Brooklyn, so I'm not
Makes sense. She
surprised you
probably
ran
lives
into
nearby.
her. Yeah,
it was
Yeah.
in Brooklyn. It's just amazing, man, like the things you do and the power you have. And talk about more of just like what it takes for you to feel like this is the book. Like, what is your process when you're looking at a proposal, when you're looking at a manuscript, and you get your aha moment is, this person needs this advance?
That's a great question. Funnily enough, the thing I know when it's the book, well, first I know it's from the pitch is when I'm intrigued, right? Like if it's a pitch that I know is not going to be exciting, I'm probably not going to dip in right away. Because I have a lot of things to read and I need to prioritize somehow. So first, the pitch has got to grab me. It's got to be about something I find really interesting, and I could talk more about, if you want, what themes I look for in a book, what makes up my list.
Amber, you are in charge
all
today.
That.
Do talk. Let's go.
I would love to hear it though.
Let's hear it.
So I'll do that first, and then I'll help you figure out how I discern between projects. So my focus is specifically on literary fiction, upmarket commercial fiction, memoir, essay collections, narrative nonfiction, and poetry. So I can do a bunch of different genres. But the thing that sort of blends my list together is that the writing is beautiful on a line level. It's visceral, it's emotive, it's, you know, poignant, it's smart, it's sharp. All of those things are something I look for on a line level when thinking about my books. But the other thing that connects them is that, like, I have all of these really interesting themes that I think connect all of the books that I've done on both sides. A lot of my work centers on actually, all of my work centers on either BIPOC folk, Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer folk, neurodivergent folk, you know, differently abled folk. That's been my focus. I feel like those perspectives are underrepresented in this industry, and so I've made that something I focus on with every book that I buy. But also in terms of themes, I'm really looking for things that I find personally interesting and I think are universal to a lot of people, which include history and legacy in the way that the past informs the present and the future, whether that's about, you know, trauma that's been passed down from a family member, or inheritance like a house, where you're talking about what that means in the context of a family. I really find those things interesting. Family stories in general are something I really find interesting, in the intricate bond between the family members. I love books about home and belonging, gender and sexuality, power dynamics, race and identity. Those are most of the themes that I focus on and sort of connect all of the different books that I buy. And so in terms of when I read a proposal or a manuscript, one, it has to align with my values and align with what I buy for the list that I acquired for, which is Dutton, Plume, and Tiny Rep. And, you know, I don't know, it has to blow me away. I'm very selective, and it's got to have an interesting voice that's unique and pulls me in. It's got to be sensory. What are the details in this story that really make me feel like I'm immersed in it? Like, is it, you know, can I hear the sounds? Can I smell the smells? Can I feel like I can touch something in there? That's the tactile sense of the books is really interesting to me. You know, are they saying something fresh or new from a different perspective? I love stuff like that. Yeah, but and I know, so I love something when I say fuck. The reason I say fuck is because I know that buying that is going to create more work for me, but I can't resist it because it's so good, and other people need to know that it's so good. So that's how I know. Or I'll like say words out loud to my husband, who's usually sitting next to me, and I'll read it to him with no context. He has no idea what's going on.
Shout out to Leo. Leo, I love you, brother. We're gonna go out to eat soon. Me, you, and Amani. That's my brother.
Yes,
I love you.
Yes. So he's very involved in all of my publishing stuff because I'm always just like, I need to talk to somebody about this. Anyway, that's how I know when a book is something I want.
Yeah. I love hearing that though, because that's just like a different sort of passion that, like, you know, once you really love something, like for you to even say fuck, even though it's a lot of work, you know, like it's great.
Yeah.
And, I
like
mean,
I'm willing to
even
take
looking
that
at you
on,
now,
you know?
it's like, damn, like I love that shit.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
That's why she's at where she's at.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
But she's trying to drink something that's empty, and we can't have that on the Professional Winner podcast.
Oh boy.
Another espresso martini.
Another espresso martini.
Well.
Oh,
we gonna switch it up?
My first classy drink. Now it's time for a real drink.
Ooh. So we're gonna make sure that Amber gets a real drink. We'll be right back after these messages on the Professional Winner podcast.
Are you looking for the best NFTs on the market? I'm talking about NFTs that even opera singers like me buy. You gotta check out Legendary Crypto Goat. You can find Legendary Crypto Goat on Rarible, OpenSea, and lazy.com/jconyers. Legendary Crypto Goat!
Yeah.
It's tough, man, and it's so funny because I felt like I learned so much and I still don't know shit.
Yeah, it's a really
It's like
really
it's crazy.
complicated industry. It's really complicated. I've tried to explain it to my friends, and they're like, because once you unwrap one layer, you have to unwrap a lot of other layers. It's like, you know, when Mike Myers says, like, oh, you're like an onion, I have layers. And Shrek, that's what the publishing industry is. Except it's worse layers beneath it.
I got you. And are we recording, guys? Are we recording the sound? Yeah, let's just keep going.
How is it now?
That is not diet soda, thank you.
Yes, it is.
I'm joking. I'm about to say.
So I'm like, I know diet soda when I taste it. You know why? It's the fake sugar. I know fake sugar when I taste it.
I'm about to say, do not play with Amber's palate,
Okay.
Now, Amber, we talked a little about the industry, and I think we're gonna find our way back to it. I feel like, you know, like, to purpose of this podcast, we have all different types of guests. We have very educational. We have just comedians who are just going off the wall. But today is about an industry that I think a lot of people don't understand. But at the same time, I still want to highlight Amber and the amazing things you're doing.
Thank you.
So, Portraits of a Thief is out. And it's doing well.
Oh, it's doing great. Yeah.
You know, I don't read as much as you.
How well?
It's already New York Times bestseller.
That's
That's
one.
right.
That's
That's
one.
right.
Netflix deal.
That's
That's
right.
two.
Oh, let me stop sounding like a stalker. Let me stop sounding like a stalker. But I'm paying attention.
Let's pull back. What was before that?
That's what I'm talking
What
about.
was before that? Okay, we'll get back to that because I got some more to add to that list.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so I started my career about 7 years ago. My first big house was HarperCollins, where I worked for 4.5 years.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I worked for
Shout out to HarperCollins.
Well,
you know? Hey.
HarperCollins
I'm
gave me opportunities.
I'm in a contract with them right now, so shout out to HarperCollins.
HarperCollins gave me opportunities. Let's just keep it at that. Yeah. So I worked there for 4.5 years. The first role I got was editorial assistant at William Morrow, an imprint of HarperCollins. My former manager actually reached out to my college program that I mentioned before, the publishing certificate program at City College, looking for just, you know, somebody to fill that role, and it was just great that we could connect through that program. And that was a really great job because I got to work on a lot of great books. One of those books being Hidden Figures, which by Margot Shetterly, which was turned into a movie, and it was about mathematicians in the 1960s, who were black women who helped launch men into space. So it's very cool.
I'm happy you explained it. My brain is like, if you don't know Hidden Figures, you know, don't download my podcast. Come on, Hidden Figures, that is a classic.
Yeah, that was one of the first books I ever got to work on as an assistant.
This is crazy. Yo, for the black women out there, like, read. Like, because I don't understand this trend of, like, I feel like a lot of the books you do turns up into movies.
Yeah, that's
just
like people don't realize how much, like, I think like Hollywood and the book world intertwine.
IP is big right now. I can get into that.
Get into it. Let's go.
You want me to get into that now?
Get into everything.
Well, first I'll tell you about my first book that I bought at William Morrow, which just sort of launched me into my editorial career and helped me figure out what I wanted to do for my own list. So the first book I acquired was in a 2-book deal. It was by a white author who's queer, but her book was about 2 Black women, and it was sort of like a gender-flipped Sherlock Holmes. So it was about Janet Watson and her partner Holmes, who were both Black women, and they were sort of discovering what the mystery was in this near future world. And the Janet Watson in this world was smart and like a fat Black woman, and not a negative way, and also had like a bionic arm. So it was very cool to see these like old school tropes turned into new things in this near future world. That book went on to win a Lambda Literary Award, and it was my first book, so it's very exciting. A Lambda Literary Award is like one of the biggest awards you could win for being part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So it's really exciting. And her second book, The Hound of Justice, which was just a second in the series of the duology, was nominated for a Lambda Literary Award. So it was really great to have the first 2 books that I ever worked on win such an illustrious award. So I'm very happy about that. I worked on a number of books at Harper. I don't know if you want me to talk about that now.
Talk about whatever.
Sure.
Let's go. Yep.
So, I have to say it was kind of hard to acquire at Harper for a number of reasons that I don't want to get into right now. But the publishers ultimately didn't have the same vision that I had, which is, again, publishing, Black and brown perspectives, newer diverse perspectives, queer perspectives in fiction and nonfiction. So, the ones I did get to buy, I was very grateful to buy. One of the books that I was able to not acquire but inherit from one of my colleagues who had previously bought it was by Morgan Jerkins, who is a New York Times bestselling author. And she wrote 2 books. First, a book called Wandering in Strange Lands, which was a memoir of sorts because it tracked her own family history 300 years back as she traveled throughout 4 sections of the country: Low Country, Georgia, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and California, searching for where Black people could go for solace in this country following the Great Migration, which began in 1916, around that time. And so she was tracking her own family history, but also sort of talking about what Black people have endured over many years in this oppressive country. And so I was really grateful to edit that book. And then her next book was called Caul Baby, which was a novel about the gentrification of Harlem, but also about a Black family who had some mystical elements to them, but it was ultimately about motherhood, about race and identity, and about fighting for, space for Black women, and what we have to do with our bodies and with ourselves to survive in this world that's often cold. So those are 2 books that I worked on at Harper. Another book, I can talk about other books, but those are 2 of my bigger books that I did at Harper. Another book I did in nonfiction is called This Is Major by Shayla Lawson. It won it was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle.
But just win an award after award. Can I borrow one?
I mean, that was a finalist, so I can't say it won. I
just want to hang one in my house.
And that was an essay collection just about Black women in pop culture. Weaved in some moments from the author's life and talked about the ways in which Black women have contributed to mainstream culture and the ways that they haven't been given their fair due in a lot of different areas. So it was really a joy to work on that, to feel seen in her work, but also to do the reverse, to help readers find her book and make them feel seen. So those are some of the books that I worked on at Harper, and now I'm at Tiny Rep, and I have other books coming out soon this year. Yeah.
All right. That was a lot, but it was amazing. So now I'm so sorry. You want to take a sip before I hit you with the next question. Take a sip, man. Take a sip.
That was amazing, though.
Your most recent creation, which I kind of segued you off of, but I want to bring it back to you. Portrait of a Thief.
Yes,
Netflix.
yes. I'm very, very happy about Portrait of a Thief. You don't know how much work it takes to get a book on the bestseller list. It's super hard to sell books these days.
Before we go on Portrait of a Thief, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry. When I got into the industry, in the background, not as an author, but supporting authors and managing authors, the question that my clients always had is, Jonathan, how do I get on the New York Times bestseller list? And I've got 40 different answers. Some was politics. Some was, if you buy your book in bulk, that doesn't count. You need 10,000 sales, which sounds like nothing, but people don't read, unfortunately.
10,000 is a strong number.
It's a strong number. I just got my first for Manor Books, which is an imprint from HarperCollins. We just got our first numbers, and man, I was happy, but they're not happy. And that plays based off how much your advance is, right? You know,
Absolutely.
because if the advance is high, even if you sell this amount a month, they didn't get their money back, so it doesn't matter, right? Can you talk to me about the New York Times bestseller list, the process? How does it really work? But I want the real, Amber. I want the real answer about how this industry, I want the exclusive. Do not play. Give it to the professional winner family. Talk to us about the New York Times bestseller list before we get into Portraits of a Thief in detail.
You know, it's crazy that you want the scoop from me, who does not work at New York Times. Because I do not have the info. In fact, the New York Times has not released this information to anyone. It is a trade secret for them about how they curate, and this is curation, how they make the New York Times list. There are 15, I work in hardcover initial format, so the list that I'm most likely looking at for my books to hit is on the hardcover list. Fiction and nonfiction are on the same page. There's 15 slots for each category, fiction and nonfiction, right? So there are very few books that can make it every week. Yeah. And we get the internal employees at all publishing houses get the New York Times list early, around 5 p.m. on Wednesdays. We cannot share that with outside sources, but of course this information we need, right? But we don't have any numbers from them, like what they're tracking or how they're tracking it. We just know if they're tracking it or if they're not. That's it. And then we can only go on our internal information. Where did this sell it at Walmart? Where did this sell at Target? Where did it sell at B&M? Where did it sell at Amazon? Once those numbers come in, we can guesstimate if it'll hit the list. You know, there are certain thresholds that make you get on the list, but those change every week. They change every week. And they change depending on how many books are out that Tuesday. All books publish on Tuesdays. So, you know, there's no real formula. The thing that does get books on lists in fiction are book clubs. Book clubs have been a huge driver of readers to books, because that's where a lot of people are finding their recommendations. They want somebody to curate for them. It just makes the process easier for a lot of readers, and I get it. Does it make me sad? Yes, but that's what gets a lot of books on the list in fiction. You know, Reese Witherspoon's book club, Jenna Hager's book club,
Oprah,
on Today Show, Oprah's book club. Book of the month. Those are
one
like
day the Athletes Book Club. We'll talk about that off camera.
Good Morning America.
But see this. But this goes to another question, and it's about people who have independent books, which I could be totally wrong. I don't know the numbers. I don't know the data. So please excuse me for the ignorance. From my world, it seems like a lot of people that are independent booksellers are mostly people of color. People don't know how to get in the industry. People, I see a lot of people in Atlanta specifically that has these independent book firms, and people are trying to create independent, produce their book in an independent way. But a lot of those sales don't count unless they're in major stores like Walmart, Target, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. So if you're independent, if you're creating an independent book, it's nearly impossible to get into those type of fields unless you're signed one of the big 5 publishers. So is that a problem in how they control the system? If you say, listen, nobody's accepting my proposal because it talks about an angle or talks about Black life and you have this audience of Black people who people assume may not be reading, and I want to do an independent book, do I have no shot at all being a New York Times bestseller or having a successful book because of that?
Now, here's the thing. You're talking about traditional publishing versus self-publishing. And those are 2 completely different mediums. Now, self-publishing, you can make money. You definitely can. But the goal of self-publishing is not always audience. You may not always be thinking about, how do I sell this? What is the pitch? How am I going to best reach readers, right? Like, you may be thinking, I want to write this story. It deserves to be told. I'm going to publish it myself. And that's completely valid, but it's a different machine. from traditional publishing. Traditional publishing has an entire sales force that sells months and months in advance to bookstores and, you know, Target, Walmart. Those are all merch accounts. That's different. All books don't even get into those stores, and that's traditional publishing. So, you know, there's barriers for our books, like editors' books. So a consumer outside of this whole conglomerate, it's super difficult because even the salespeople can't get every book into every store. So it's limited resources, and let's not forget that booksellers have been overworked and underpaid for a long time. And so there may not be enough of them to staff not only the publishers' books, of which there are hundreds across many publishers, and then having to worry about individual self-publishing people trying to get their books into the stores. So it's a lot of different factors that go into that, but they're very different machines. And as a writer, as an author, as someone who wants to publish a book, you have to decide which avenue you want to go in. You can't do self-publishing and traditional publishing at the same time with the same book.
Thank you. Let's segue back into Portraits of a Thief.
Yes.
Netflix.
Okay.
This is like the
Netflix.
sixth time we said we're going to segue back into it.
We're back to it.
I think we actually should give the audience the actual.
So I'll give you a little description of the book so you know what it is. So it's called Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. It came out on 4/5/2022. It is a national bestseller. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's an international bestseller, #1 in the UK. And it's sold in a bunch of different territories. It is set to become a series by Netflix.
Top tier.
So there is a lot of really great sort of like force behind this book. This book was based on a true story of Chinese art disappearing from Western museums in a series of smash and grab robberies, and the author sort of made it her own, and about these 5 Chinese American college students who were taking back looted art stolen from China centuries ago that now resides in Western museums. So it's about repatriation of art. It's about the complexity of the Chinese American diaspora. It's about found family between these 5 characters. It's about coming of age in a lot of ways because these characters are about to embark on life for their own outside of college for the first time. Yeah, and these are all themes I just find really interesting. Anyway, I'm very, very happy about that book. It was a surprise, actually, when it hit the New York Times bestseller list because, again, the driver for books a lot of the time is book clubs. And because this didn't have that, we were like just crossing our fingers that it would make it. And because of, you know, how great Grace is on social media, and just all of the enthusiasm that this book has had from the very beginning, I think that propelled it, you know, and with the support of Phoebe Robinson too, who's the founder and has a large social media presence, I think that sort of helped get this book on the list. So I'm very happy.
Yeah. Talk about the Netflix deal, about how that intertwined between the successful books and getting into the IP and the media.
So I don't deal a lot with the film TV side. Publishers almost never retain the rights to TV film. That usually falls to the author, and the author usually works with the agent on that. And the agent usually is at a literary agency, and sometimes they have an in-house film TV department. Sometimes they do not, and they have a co-agent that works on that. In this case, she had a co-agent, Steve Fisher, and he worked in conjunction with Hannah and Grace to make sure that, you know, the project got out to all the major sort of like streaming sites and producers and all of that who needed to see the book, who worked in IP. And that process was pretty soon after I bought the book. I want to say a couple months in, and she was already having talks with, you know, Netflix and ABC and all other sort of like production places. And yeah, I wasn't involved in any of those conversations because again, that's the agency side. Yeah. But she did tell me that Netflix got her vision. She, meaning Grace Lee, is the executive producer. Nice. So she's helping to write the script for this series that hopefully will go to production, crossing my fingers.
You never know.
You never know.
A lot of people don't understand that just because you get a TV deal, it may not never seen the light of day. It's a lot of moving parts that we won't talk about for today's episode.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. And, you know, Grace and her agent just keep me abreast about what's going on with it. Hopefully we can do a movie tie-in edition, which has like the cover of the movie art. I mean, when it comes out. But yeah. And in terms of IP, it's huge right now. If you look on Netflix, almost like all of the new, I don't want to say almost, but a lot of the new, you know, things that are coming out of it, series and television shows and movies, they're based on books, and a lot of people don't read the books, but they'll watch the media. But that means that the IP is so valuable because, if you think about it, we haven't really seen anything new from the entertainment industry that isn't based on books. Original ideas are super hard to fund these days. You know why? Because there's no base for it. If you buy IP, you know that other people are interested in this idea, so they want to see it to execution. And so they've been looking to IP in the book industry for this for a long time, and because they've been successful. And think about the book was a success, and then the TV show just took off. And they've been continuing all the different streaming sets having this. Like there's one right now, Severance by Ling Ma, which was turned into a television show that's now on HBO. There's one by Emily St. John Mandel, Station 11, which is on HBO. There's just like a lot of IP going around because it's a sure thing for them. They know that this is something that people are interested in. So I don't see that trend dying down for a while.
Wow. Is there a prediction of when this Netflix show is going to be coming out?
Who the hell knows?
Possibly. Soon, hopefully, maybe.
It could be 5 years. It could be
I know.
more.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
All right. Another question that I do have, though. Obviously, because we're still going towards a society where, our attention spans are just obviously decreasing, A lot of people don't even read books anymore. Do you see sales more and listening, like Audible books, or in comparison to, like actual reading books?
I don't know that there is like an either or situation, like people still buy physical books the most. Wow. I think it even increased during 2020 because people wanted something tactile, something they can touch, because we were all touch starved. We were all in our houses in the beginning of 2020, and those sales have stayed steady. There's been no decrease in the amount of physical books people have bought. But over the last 5 years, there's been a huge push towards audio from Audible, and a lot of publishers have their own in-house audio teams. Penguin Random House has one. And they, hire voice actors to do the work. And I think that is convenient for a lot of readers because people don't have time, you know, like they put it on while they're washing their dishes. They're putting it on while they're in their car, like it's a time saving thing. But at least they're reading. That's all I really care about. Those sales are, great. And they've been really supplementing a lot of books, depending on what it is. And,
And how about personally for yourself? What do you prefer?
I do not like audiobooks.
Why is
because
that?
I don't like people talking at me. And I'm a reader. I want to read it on the page. That's the way I feel it the most. You know?
I feel that though. It's like it's more of a personal difference, where it's like you're reading a book, you actually have your own voice and you're creating that mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah. As you're doing something, as you're multitasking, it's always very hard. Like I always find myself going back to have to listen to that chapter over again to actually perceive that. So it's different. So
for sure.
Now I know you're an editor at the top of your game, but are you working on anything that, as far as writing or working on your own story, is there anything that motivates you to have your own book one day?
I've been a writer for a long time. I started writing in high school. At first poetry, and it was the kind of shitty poetry that most teenagers do. My life is a dark abyss and all that shit. I was very emo in high school, so
it's all good. It's all good. I think every low key genius have an emo moment.
You got to, man. You gotta embrace the darkness. So I wrote then, and I knew I wanted to major in English. A lot of those programs had creative writing parts, and so I would write short stories. I started working on a novel when I was in college, though it's not the novel I'm working on now. So I've just always been a writer, which has been interesting. But I knew I couldn't have a career as a writer because it's hard. It's very, very hard. I went into college at the time of, right after the financial crash of 2008, and all these magazines were shuttering, all these publications were shuttering, and being a writer full time was just not a feasible thing that a person who doesn't have money could do, especially as a Black woman. So I wrote leisurely and for school, and I always sort of worked on my own projects, but I started taking it more seriously, like in writing a full novel that I would finish when I started in publishing, actually. And the reason I started writing it is it's kind of interesting. As a part of my job, I have to network with agents, and that means, you know, taking them to lunches and taking them to drinks and being like, hey, like, I want to buy these kinds of books, send them to me. So I was doing that one day, and I met with this agent, and she asked me, what's the book that you don't have in right now that you want to read? And I said, you know, well, I don't want to talk about the kind of book that I'm writing right now, but I told her what it was. It was like a workplace book with Black and brown characters from outer boroughs in New York City, which you don't see often. A lot of workplace novels are not about people of color, especially if they're in like corporate settings. So I was like, well, I want, you know, my own experience reflected. And since it wasn't being sent to me, I decided to write it. And the agent was like, you should write this if you're not seeing it. And I was like, cool, okay, well, let's do it. So she and I corresponded for a number of years, maybe two years. And I was sending her like early pages and sort of like me figuring out exactly what the through line of this novel that I was going to write was going to be about. And then, you know, it just took me a long time to draft this because my job is so intense, you know, like I'm editing during the day. Sometimes I'm editing at night, I'm editing on the weekends. So making time to write is low priority, and which is sad because, you know, I love writing, you know,
still have a job to do.
Exactly. So it took me a long time to finally finish a draft. But when I did have something that I felt, you know, proud of and felt it was a good start, this is not the usual process for querying because I know that can be difficult for a lot of authors. But because a lot of agents know me already, I just sent emails to their inboxes like, hey, like, I'm writing a book about this. Here's my pitch. And my pitch was just like, you know, a 2-line note at the top about summarizing the book in 2 lines, a summary, and then my author bio. And I was just like, yeah, like, this is what it's about. Let me know if you want to read it and I'll send it to you. And a number of agents did respond back to me and wanted to read it, which was great. One thing I should mention is that I did do like a writer's workshop at the Hurston Wright Foundation at Howard a couple of years ago, which helped hone this project, which is great. Anyway, so yeah, I got my agent shortly after, I want to say 2 weeks after I sent it out to agents. Again, this is unusual, but only because I know these people like personally from the industry. So I got a bunch of offers on my manuscript from agents, and one of them stood out to me because she was interested in not only my book, but also about the film TV potential of it, which I, you know, thought that would be interesting for my book too. And yeah, so we've been working with each other for, I don't know, maybe a year now, and we're in revisions, and hopefully I'll be able to send it out soon.
Yo, Amber, I'm about to talk about you, but I'm not gonna look at you. I'm looking at my camera. That was the realest shit I've ever heard. She said, there is something that the market needs, but we're not receiving it. So I'm gonna do the shit myself. That has been the story of Black people forever. And I'm not trying to make this a black or white thing. It's just amazing at the fact that she knew that she needed something, but society wasn't giving it. And she took in the role and said, I'm going to do this shit myself. Let's go, Amber. Should we snap, clap, snap?
Okay.
She's an editor. Let's snap. You know,
yeah. I'm all fancy. I'm sophisticated.
Yeah, let's be sophisticated, you know, but like,
I like quiet and silence, so snapping is good.
Yeah, because you got to read 400 pages
exactly.
a day.
Exactly.
I would need solace too if I got to read 300 pages a day.
It makes me so sad because I love music, but I'm like, I can't listen to this
man.
and edit.
I didn't even think about that.
It's so hard.
Because you have to imagine
Because you're hearing
things.
the words and then you're like trying to edit the words.
Classical music?
Yes, I can listen to classical music.
Okay.
Is that why audiobooks is cheating for you? Because you can kind of hear their expression.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm a literary fiction purist, which means that it's all about the placement of the words on the page. And so I need to physically see that because it's about craft at that level. It's
understood.
Because a lot of books are about entertainment, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with commercial books at all. But I'm not a huge fan of commercial books for my editor list, just because I believe in the beauty of the words on the page. And so audiobooks just don't capture that same essence in the same way.
All right. So you're sitting next to a sign. This is Black Girls Rock, right? In terms of what you do, like you were going back to the idea you grew up in the Bronx, right? In my head, I'm like, first thing I imagine is just you reading a book, like in the Bronx, and it's just like you're sitting there hiding in a library or something, and then just like I always feel like that's just not a normal thing to do. When I read, that was not a normal thing to do, right? You becoming an editor is not a normal thing to do. Being a Black girl in that industry it's not a normal thing. There's less than 50 people. What would you recommend someone that would want to go down that route do?
That's an interesting question. I mean, definitely reading is a part of that. Like you have to know what people are reading now. Like don't just pay attention to what they're teaching you in school. What's on the list of classics. I mean, fuck the classics, because those are all by white men whose values don't align with yours. So I don't believe in subscribing to the classics. Read what you think aligns with your, entertainment values, whatever. But also read what book clubs are selling, or what's on the bestseller list, or what's being reviewed by major publications that align with what you're interested in, because that's information you're definitely going to need in going into the industry, seeing as though you need to understand how people are selling books and what those books are about and what's intriguing readers. Like, what are the universal themes that these books are talking about that gets people excited. So definitely have that base of like being a reader, because that's the main thing that's going to keep you in this industry, right? Passion for writing, passion for reading, passion for publishing books. If you do not have that passion, you're not going to want to stay in this industry. So having a passion for reading and wanting to publish books is a number one concern for me. But also, I would say, make sure you understand how the industry works. Do internships when you're in college, and obviously only do paid ones. Unpaid ones are not worth your time, because as Black and brown people, we cannot do labor for free. I don't believe in that anymore. Laws have changed, and that's now illegal to do unpaid internships. Anyway, those internships can teach you the inner workings of an agency, the inner workings of the publishing house, and those are useful tools that you'll need to survive and succeed in the industry. So definitely do some internships. I would say, if you can, do some informational interviews. Reach out to people who work in the industry or are connected tangentially from your university. Are there professors who publish books? Can they tell you about the publishing process? Are there people who have interned, in the industry who you can ask about? Are there people you can reach out to on LinkedIn who you're like maybe one person away from, one shade of a degree away from, that you can ask questions about the industry too? So that's a huge part. The networking part of this industry is annoying, but can be useful in a lot of ways. Look at the way people are publishing books. I said that before, so I always fully believed in that. Create a community, like are there other people you can go to ask questions about, your life, and just rely on. I mean, because this is a hard industry. You're definitely going to need your people to go to in times of hardship. So surround yourself with people who are positive, or can be positive during trying times.
Nice. I do have another question, though.
Okay.
And that just goes back to that idea of passion, right? And one thing I talked to John about is that I can't do something unless I am passionate about it. I will literally, demotivation will come, and I can't. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to aspire to do it, and it's almost impossible sometimes. However, even sometimes my personal life will affect that, right? Do you ever find times where you're demotivated, where maybe your personal life will affect you? Maybe you're trying to write something and you'll get like a writer's block. Do you ever find some times where it's just hard and you need to do something different that'll bring that spark back into it?
That's very interesting.
You got me nervous. That was like an evil laugh.
Yeah. I love evil laughing and evil staring. I'm a Scorpio, so it's
dab me up. Dab me up. Scorpio season.
This industry is all consuming, and I've said this before, and it's worth mentioning now because it takes over so much of your life. And so it can be difficult to break yourself away from it. There's always the guilt, right? Like, how am I going to get this work to this author that needs it? And how am I going to do that in the allotted time from 9 to 5, you know? Like, and sometimes that's just not possible because there's just too much work. There's a lot of admin work that comes with publishing that nobody sees except the editor. There's a lot of like author care that goes into it that we have to deal with. Like, there's just a lot that falls on the editor's plate that maybe doesn't fall to other departments. And so you can focus on that almost entirely forever, you know? So it can be hard to find that workplace balance. And so if I'm so entrenched in my author's work and making sure their work succeeds, when do I have time for myself? The answer is almost never. I over the course of 2020 and 2021, I do have a writers group that I write with every bi-weekly, no, actually twice a week, with other publishing professionals who are also writers. And that's great because it's a great community to talk about writing, but they also understand what it's like to work in this industry at the same time and how difficult it can be to separate those two brains, which sort of operate the same space. Editing and writing is sort of, you know, compulsory. So it's been good to have them to keep me in check, which is great. But yeah, writer's block happens all the time. So I'm thinking, shouldn't I be doing something else? Shouldn't I be editing their work? Shouldn't I be working? But, you know, working on my own book is important too. Like, that's always been a part of my dream and my goals as an individual person, not a company person. So, you know, it's difficult. I'm still working on it.
Yo, Amber, I appreciate you today. You have been awesome. We thank you for coming on the platform. And usually how we always end the episode is with the one most important question to me and Gabe, and that is what a professional winner is to you.
Professional winner. I mean, I will have won once I gain that work-life balance. So let's just put that out there right now. But a professional winner is, I think, somebody who is, I don't know, excited to work on their projects that they're doing, you know, like, I don't love everything about my job, but I'm so passionate about the books, about the work. Like, how, first of all, you know, this book blows me away, right? Like, that's what's keeping me here. Like, it may not have the best salary, I may have to do all of this work, but I find this work so enriching and important to not only me, but readers who will then find this book and then maybe find themselves. Like, I can't give up on that. And so I think, you know, that makes a professional winner, just being inspired by the work that you do, and, you know, staying true to your values. You know, like, I have specific values that I came into this industry with, and I try to stick to those at all times. And me being able to do that here at you know, Dutton and Tiny Reparations it's been a joy, and I'd love to just continue to do that work because that's what makes this all worth it.
Amber, thank you so much. We're happy that we got the right Amber today.
The best one.
The best Amber today.
The only Amber in publishing.
Hey.
I'm just kidding. I think there's like one other.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining the Professional I forgot to say the
Professional
name.
Winner.
The Professional Winner podcast. And keep being amazing. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
And we're out.
Gotta write my book soon now.